It's a pleasure to have you here at the details now. Ghana is expected to receive 300,000 Russian-made Sputnik V vaccines this week to get our vaccination program back on track. The country has struggled to keep to its plan following supply cuts from India. The Asian country is the main producer of AstraZeneca vaccines, but is struggling to cope with demand at home and deal with significant surge in COVID-19 cases. Speaking to journalists on the sidelines of an event to mark the 11th Africa Vaccination Week in Ghana, Health Minister JoyNews said he expects delivery of some 300,000 doses of the Sputnik V vaccines this week.
We are trying to make efforts to try to get in the country some Russian-type Sputnik, though we have made initial approaches and expecting some shipments to come in. They demonstrated availability and brought in the first 160,000, which is kept there, waiting for about 300,000 to come sometime this week. We were expecting about 2-3 weeks back, but we have faced challenges with vaccine availability and payment structures and things like that. I believe sometime this week we may receive the 300,000.
Now, even though more countries are turning to the Russian-produced Sputnik V vaccines, a latest report by Brazilian health authorities questions its efficacy. Dr. Yabediako, an immunologist with the West Africa Center for Cell Biology of Infectious Pathogens, WACBIB, is here to explain to us what this really means. Thank you so much for your time here, Doc. So let's start by breaking it down. What do the Brazilian authorities mean when they say the Sputnik V vaccine is defective?
Thank you, Bernice, for having me. So what the Brazilian health authorities have announced is that due as the result of certain further studies they have done, they have determined that it would appear as though the adenoviral vector in one of the Sputnik V vaccines. So the Sputnik V vaccine is a two-dose vaccine. And actually, the first dose is one adenoviral vector. The second dose is a different adenoviral vector. Now, they have determined that one of the adenoviral vectors appears not to have been genetically modified to prevent it from replicating. So the way you think of it is, when you use adenoviral vectors to make a vaccine, AstraZeneca is a similar design. You genetically modify the vector, which is a virus in itself, to prevent it from replicating within the host. So when you are injected with the vaccine, the vector itself cannot replicate. So it basically goes through a single cycle and then it's cleared. It delivers its payload, it delivers the target that it's supposed to do, and then it is cleared from your system. Now, the way you do that is to genetically modify the vector to delete a particular gene to prevent it from being able to replicate. Now, what they have done is they took this vaccine and grew it in a lab, and it was able to replicate, which would suggest that the vaccine has not been modified appropriately. Now, when this happens, it creates a concern because now you are immunizing people with potentially a compromised vector that may establish an ongoing infection that may have its own consequences. So, I think the Russian Federation is disputing these claims. So now it's sort of one side saying one thing, the other saying the other. The European Medical Agency is currently evaluating Sputnik V. And I believe, it will be in our best interest to wait for that evaluation to be completed before we make a decision, because this is new information that has previously not been available. The emergency use authorization awarded Sputnik V in Ghana at the time did not have the benefit of this information. Now that these reports have been reported by a number of news agencies, including Reuters, from Brazil, and in fact, the Brazilian government have refused to approve this vaccine based on this information, I think Ghana, we have to sort of be cautious before we administer this vaccine, because if it is true that indeed these vaccines have been compromised, then we do not want them to be administered to the Ghanaian people.
So, Doc, what happens in the case of administering a vaccine of this sort? What will happen to an individual who takes the jab?
Well, it's difficult to tell. I mean, there are a couple of things that potentially could go wrong. As I said, the whole point of the genetic modification is so that the virus, the vector itself only goes through a single cycle and then is cleared. You basically do not want to give somebody, because these adenoviruses cause colds, right? So you don't want to give somebody a high dose of a virus that is capable of replicating. It is, we all hear about, when we've talked about vaccines, we always say they give you a weakened form of the virus. Well, in this case, the data suggests that this has not been weakened. And so it could create certain issues. Another problem is usually, in order for the vector to carry the spike protein, which is the SARS-CoV-2 protein of interest, you have to remove one piece of the DNA and then replace it with a different one. The fact that this virus is able to replicate suggests that it may have lost the spike. So if it has lost the spike, then it's not going to give you any protection against SARS-CoV-2. So there are a lot of unknowns. Currently, all we can go off is this initial report, but it has raised significant questions about not just the efficacy, but in many ways, even the safety of the Sputnik. And so that's why I think we need to not rush into things. I believe that we are receiving 300,000 doses of AstraZeneca vaccine this week from vaccines that were supposed to go to DRC and COVAX has now diverted them to a number of countries, including Ghana. So, AstraZeneca has no such problem. We may have some of those soon. Perhaps we use those whilst we wait for the European Medical Agency to give us another report on the safety of Sputnik V.
So in response to this, the Russian Direct Investment Fund, which markets the Sputnik V vaccine, rejected Anvisa's comment, saying the shot's safety and efficacy had been assessed by regulators in 61 countries which approved for its use. But you're just telling us that the European Medical Association is yet to finish its assessment on this. But right here in Ghana, what do we do while we wait for this? Can we embark on our own form of assessment?
So I believe that we could. I mean, the tests that were done in Brazil, I believe, are within our capacity. Noguchi Memorial Institute, it has the capacity to grow viruses. I'm sure that this is something that could be done locally to see whether or not indeed this vaccine has replicating capacity. In terms of the 61 countries, we have to be very careful. Sputnik V has not been approved by any of the large continental bodies. It's not been approved by the WHO. It's not been approved by the US FDA. It's not been approved yet by the European Medical Agency. Yes, it has been approved in a number of different countries, including Ghana. But this is based purely upon the documentation submitted by the manufacturer and the clinical trials that were done. Many of the countries, that have approved it do not have the capacity to do detailed follow-up studies. So they basically base their assessment upon what has been done elsewhere. Now, up until this Brazilian data came out, Sputnik V, and I was fully supportive of us using it because all the data suggested that it seemed to be okay. With this new data coming out of of Brazil, it raises questions. Now, it's possible that the batch that was used in the clinical trial was fine. Perhaps the batch that went to Brazil is compromised. So it may be a quality control issue. It may not be that all of the Sputnik V is bad, but it may be that there has been some issues with production. Now, that still raises questions because we don't know which batch we are getting, right? We don't know if ours is compromised or not. And so as soon as there's an issue with a batch, then you pause using any of the vaccine till you've identified where the problems are. So I think we have to be very, very cautious. Given that this information has come out before we've rolled out this vaccine, I think the prudent thing to do would be to wait for more investigations, especially as it's currently under review by a highly respected European Medical Agency. Let's see what they find out before we deploy it in Ghana. Or maybe even better, let us, we have some of it in stock. Maybe we can do some of these initial lab tests ourselves as well.
All right, Doc. So you mentioned Ghana is part of the 61 countries that has approved the use of the Sputnik V vaccine. I'm just wondering how we came about that decision. Did we do the test ourselves as a country, or we basically just relied on data that's available?
I mean, that is a question better answered by the FDA. My understanding from what I've heard from the FDA is a lot of the time, especially for the emergency use authorization, it's based upon a dossier of data that is submitted to our FDA. Now, our FDA is, it has very, very high standards. It's well regarded around the world. but a lot of the decisions are based upon prevailing data that is already available. We don't have, in this country, we don't yet have the capacity to do the actual lab, besides assessing things about, maybe contamination or the like. In terms of testing efficacy and so on, we haven't run any trials in Ghana. So the data that the FDA is basing their decision on is data that is submitted with the vaccine when they apply for approval. And it's usually data that is aggregated from different places. So up until this point, all the data for Sputnik said, well, it has been tested in Russia. The tests have not been as extensive as AstraZeneca, but the results have been promising. And given that there's not a lot of vaccine around, it made sense to approve it. Now that this report has been released, I'm very sure that our FDA is looking at it. And if it does prove to be credible, they may need to revise their authorization. That is well within their rights. It would not mean they made a mistake. It's just that now there's new information available. And if they take that new information on board and they think it's credible, they may reverse their decision to license this.
And Doc, let me just mention here that we reached out to the FDA and we are yet to receive feedback from the FDA. We also reached out to the Ghana Health Service and yet to receive feedback on this, as we are told that we expected to receive some 300,000 doses of the Sputnik V vaccines. But Doc, let's come down to how this affects people's behavior towards receiving the jab. Already, we saw some bit of hesitation. There were all these conspiracies about the vaccines and the safety of the vaccines. And so, do you think this gives credence to those who say we've just rushed through this? We didn't give ourselves enough time to test the efficacy of the vaccines?
No, actually, I would say that this is the system working. The fact that the Brazilian government has paused or has refused to license a vaccine, and that data is now available, shows that in general the systems work. We are in an unusual situation. Vaccines are being produced in mass. We need to get vaccines into people. We cannot afford to delay. And so, yes, we are trying to do things at high pace. But I think the fact that this report has been released suggests that there are checks and balances. And now Ghana's FDA will now have access to the same data the Brazilian government did. And so our FDA can now make the decision also based on that. With regards to the AstraZeneca vaccine and the side effects, we made the decision to continue, as many countries did, because the risk of side effects was outweighed by the risk of the disease. In this case, this is now an issue of vaccine quality, not so much side effects, but vaccine quality. And that is another decision that we are going to have to make in terms of whether we accept the vaccine into the country or whether we don't. But I think people should rest assured the checks and balances are there. And in my opinion, provided the process is allowed to run its course, the right decisions will be made. Ghana's FDA now can request the same dossier that the Brazilians have access to, and they can make a determination. If they think that evidence is credible, then they can withdraw the license to Sputnik, or they can decide based on other information that they think it's still safe and they can proceed.
I appreciate your time here this morning. Dr. Albediako is an immunologist at WACCBIP, sharing his thoughts on the latest information on the Sputnik V vaccines. Away from COVID related to Ghana, India's hospitals and crematoriums are overwhelmed by the daily number of people dying from the coronavirus. There's widespread shortage of oxygen and medicines. The rising number of cases and deaths are attributed to a new variant of the virus. Consultant psychologist in India, Swetha Narayan Vignesh, told my colleague Daniel Dazi on the polls that a lot of Indians are in great distress following the surge.
From March 1st week, we started having sudden surge of cases, and the second wave hit us really bad by mid-March. So we are reporting close to 3.5 lakhs case a day, which is not a small number. So we are having a very large number on a daily basis, and the number of deaths are more than 3,000 a day. So this is not a good number to look at. It's really dreadful right now to see these numbers with their anxieties. There's a surge in the number of clients that I've been having in terms of anxiety. People are anxious about their health. You know, will I die? This is the question I get to answer on a daily basis. People are scared they would die due to COVID. And it's really dreadful for them to cope with this right now.
How about the health facilities and the crematoriums? You understand that you're overwhelmed totally on that front.
Yes, so I have been reading a lot of cases wherein they're saying they don't have enough space in the crematoriums. And obviously hospital and healthcare, I know because I have a lot of friends in the healthcare system working right now. So hospitals are filling to the brim. And my heart goes out to all the frontline workers who have been working, let it be police or the army or the defense or the medical professionals. They've been working round the clock, but the number of cases doesn't seem to come down.
Meanwhile, EU countries, including Germany, have pledged to send aid to India to contain the situation. From Germany, with our partners, DW political correspondent Thomas Sparrow has some updates.
Chancellor Angela Merkel stressed earlier this week that Germany was urgently preparing a mission of support to India, focused in particular on providing medical equipment or oxygen. And the German Defense Ministry, for instance, reportedly said that it was assessing the possibility of providing mobile oxygen generators. At the same time, aid is being pulled at an EU level through the so-called EU Civil Protection Mechanism, and the head of the European Commission, Ursula von der Leyen, said that a first shipment of oxygen, medicine and equipment would be delivered over the coming days. And what this concretely means is that the EU will be delivering oxygen concentrators provided by countries like Ireland or Romania, ventilators provided by Sweden or Luxembourg, or antiviral medicines provided by Belgium or Portugal. It is important to stress that aid is not only being delivered to India. It was reported this week that the German Foreign Ministry is also sending aid to countries in Africa and in Latin America. And the Foreign Ministry said it had received aid requests from more than 121 countries since the pandemic began, and was frequently checking what aid could be delivered.
Away from COVID, Special Prosecutor Martin Amidu says Ghanaians must be, quote, worried that they are being forced to accept Kisie Jabing as the next Special Prosecutor. Mr. Amidu says Kisie Jabing is, quote, a surrogate of the alter ego of Africa Legal Associates. This is a firm founded by the President's cousin, Gabi Asario Tredako, end quote. Attorney General Godfred Yeboah-Dame has written to President Akufo-Addo nominated Mr. Jabing as Special Prosecutor. The former SP alleges the news of this appointment was deliberately leaked to force Ghanaians and the President to accept his nomination. My colleague Daniel Dazi joins us via Zoom with more on this letter. So what exactly, Daniel, is the concern of the former Special Prosecutor regarding Africa Legal Associates?
Well, so Bernard, he states in the letter that anyone deeply knowledgeable about the Ejapa Royalties transaction corruption risk assessment report knows that one of the beneficiaries of the Ejapa Royalties transaction is Africa Legal Associates, whose contract to participate in the transaction was found to be contrary to the Public Procurement Act and tainted by bid rigging. He goes on to say that anyone who cares to know knows that the alter ego of Africa Legal Associates is a cousin of the President, who also established Asase Radio, which began official transmission on 14th June 2020. The Ejapa Royalties transaction records show the role the President's cousin, who established Africa Legal Associates and Asase Radio, played with Fight and Case LLP of London, one of the foreign law firms in the suspected corruption transaction. Now, he concludes, it must therefore be worrying to any patriotic Ghanaian not afraid of the culture of silence to see Asase Radio undertaking political propaganda beginning on 25th April 2021 to 26th April 2021 to prepare the minds of the Ghanaian and international public to accept the surrogate of the alter ego of Asase Radio Station and Africa Legal Associates as the Special Prosecutor, as mandated under Section 4.1 of the Office of Special Prosecutor Act 2018, Act 959, Bernard.
Daniel, so does he, for example, make any recommendations, even though he's asked that Ghanaians should be worried?
What he does do, Bernard, is imply that the President, for instance, is under some sort of pressure to appoint Kissie Jabin, even though he doesn't specifically make a recommendation as to what should be done about that. And I'll read to you this section of it. It says that he said really that when he was nominated, it was announced by the president, even though the process started with the AG nominating him. And in this case, the news is out even before the president takes action about the AG's nominee. Let me read to you this part. How then did the nomination letter of the new special prosecutor come into the public domain to make rounds in the press? Asase Radio again should also have told the Ghanaian and the international public that its surrogate and nominee special prosecutor in the published letter is a personal friend and classmate of the Attorney General and the owner of Asase Radio, all of whom attended the University of Ghana's Faculty of Law and Ghana Law School. The independence of the special prosecutor from the direction or control of any person or authority in the performance of the functions of his office are the operative statutory words for the nomination of an impartial special prosecutor, not a word with an ism. And that's what he states about, his perception that President Akufo-Addo is being pressurized into appointing Mr. Jabin.
We'll leave it here. That's my colleague Daniel Dazi giving us details of a letter written by former Special Prosecutor Martin Abidu on the nomination of Kissie Jabin as the next Special Prosecutor. Away from that, government has announced a ban on all exploration and prospecting for gold in forest reserves effective Friday, April 30. Also, all reconnaissance licenses granted by the Minerals Commission have also been banned. Lands and Natural Resources Minister Samuel Abu-Jinapor announced the new directors at Jubilee House Wednesday.
Having the opportunity, I'll just seek to clarify just one or two things which are already in the public domain, which is that under the instructions of the President, the Ministry of Lands and Natural Resources is issued policy directives in respect of forest reserves. There's been a bit of confusion about it, and I thought this is a good occasion to clarify. The first directive the President got us to issue is that moving forward, the Forestry Commission should not issue forest entry permits for purposes of mining in forest reserves. The process is such that the final permit one requires in order to be able to mine in a forest reserve is a forest entry permit. The President got us to issue this instruction, which says that no more issuance of forest entry permit. And so, as from I think about 2 weeks ago, there cannot be fresh mining in forest reserves. If you've had a mining lease, you've had a forest entry permit before this instruction was given, you are not affected. So the directive doesn't take retroactive effect. But from now onwards, if you get a mining lease and you go to the Forestry Commission, the door is shut. So that's the first instruction that has been given. The second one is that the President took the view that people come for prospecting, recognizance, and or exploration licenses on the pretext that they want to go and explore for gold, and yet proceed to mine. And therefore, he got us to also issue an instruction which says, as from Friday, the 30th of this month, no prospecting, recognizance, and or exploration can take place in a forest reserve. So you cannot engage in prospecting, you cannot engage in exploration, you cannot engage in recognizance. Whether you have a license or not, you have to cease. But just not just that, you are also to evacuate your equipment for purposes of exploration.
Now, President Akufo-Addo on Wednesday had a closed-door discussion with the Lands Minister, National Security, and 16 regional ministers to strategize on ways to ensure full implementation of recommendations reached at the two-day dialogue on illegal mining. Presidential correspondent Elton Brobe joins us with what happened. Hello, Elton. So we know who the people in the meeting were, but we understand that the Lands Minister clarified the earlier directives on the mining permit?
Yes, exactly, Benny. So the new directive is that even though tomorrow the ban will come into force, those who have already been issued with recognizance or exploration or forest entry permits can still go ahead and undertake their activities. That is for those who already have permits for such activities. Those who are in the process of securing such permits, the ban affects them. But those who already been given permits for reconnaissance, for exploration, for forest entry, such individuals, the law or the ban which comes into effect tomorrow will not affect them, which literally means that they can go ahead and undertake their mining exploration or reconnaissance, or they can still go ahead and enter the forest reserve for the activities for which they've been granted the license to do. So that's the clarification the minister brought to bear on the directive that is taking place tomorrow when he met the president. This meeting was between the National Security Operatives, the Ministry of Interior, the Ministry of Defense, the Minister for Local Government and Rural Development, as well as the 16 regional ministers, also attended by President Kufuor, the Vice, and the Lands and Natural Resources Minister. Now, my information is that starting tomorrow, the ministry will publish names of companies that have been granted mining these forest entry permits, as well as the cognizance permits. They'll publish such names. Those that have been given, those already having the license to undertake such activities, and those that have been banned. So that the regional coordinating councils can now enforce the directive starting tomorrow.
Elton, before you go, we heard from the president just before that dialogue that resulted in the recommendations. But what is his response to the recommendations?
So unfortunately, after the minister gave his introductory remarks, the media was asked to vacate the room because they were now going into closed session to discuss the merits of the fight going forward. But my information is that the regional ministers were there because it does appear that throughout the entire country, there is gold deposits everywhere. The regional ministers themselves are the chairpersons of the Regional Security Council, so they will be leading the enforcement of the government ban in the mining sector because they have declared river bodies, forest reserves as red zones, which means that no activity should take place. And for that reason, they have to go out and enforce. President Kufuor, even before that one said, he's already directed the military to undertake swoops and ensure that they seize and prevent people from mining around water bodies and in the forest. And that particular exercise is ongoing. And tomorrow, the military high command will update the nation on progress made so far and when and how they intend to carry the exercise beyond the central, western, into the Ashanti and the eastern region. President Kufuor also, I'm told, that instructed the chief of staff to make, and the finance minister, to make money available to ensure the sustainability of the particular exercise because they don't want to start, leave it and then come back to it. And also a call to the defense minister to ensure that their men act in accordance with the law, be professional, to avoid the situation where the people who are at the forefront of fighting this become the problem themselves. So these are the marching orders that the regional ministers, the defense, the interior, the national security, as well as the local government ministers were tasked with at the close of session, according to my source. All
right, we'll leave it here. Elton Brobe is presidential correspondent, giving us updates of that meeting between some ministers and the president. Well, Michael Adeba is vice president of Galamsey Action Group. It's a group that's advocating for the banning of galamsey, which is destroying our environment and river bodies. He joins the conversation via Zoom. Thank you very much, sir. So you have some demands of the leadership in the Western and Western North regions. Briefly outline what those demands are. Hello, Mr. Adeba. Well, we are trying to reach Mr. Michael Adeba back on the line. He is with the group Galamsey Action, and they are demanding, in fact, they have a petition to stop Galamsey and irresponsible mining practices in Western and Western North regions of Ghana. So let me just bring you some highlights of that petition. It says, on behalf of the people of our two regions and on our own behalf, we, the undersigned, would like to bring to your attention the following topical issues currently ravaging our dear land. They go on to talk about the natural resources in the country, especially in the Western and Western North regions, and say underneath our lands and our shores are even more valuable minerals and oil resources. Unfortunately, our people have gained little or no benefits from these resources. And they talk about how in the past 10 years, irresponsible and illegal mining have left unspeakable devastation in their land. So thankfully, we've got Mr. Michael Adeba back on the line. He's vice president of that group, Galamsey Action Group. Thank you for your time here this morning. So quickly, share with us your demands, especially to the leadership of Western and Western North regions and traditional authorities.
Thank you for inviting me to your program, and good morning to your listeners and viewers. I'm Michael Adeba, the vice president of Galamsey Action Group, Ghana. As I said, we pleaded when we sent a petition to the government, even to the presidency, to the parliament, to stop Galamsey on our river bodies and our land, to which our river bodies and our lands are being affected. That's the more reason why we sent the petition to our people.
All right, so I have a copy of that petition. In point 2, you are respectfully demanding that Nananom, that's traditional authorities in your region, support and enforce without fear or favor the call by the Minister for Lands and Natural Resources to halt all licensing for the prospecting of gold, bauxite, or any other minerals in our forest reserves. So, from your group, is it your perception that government is not receiving the needed support by traditional authorities in the Western and Western North regions?
Yeah, it is true. The government is not getting the needed support because, let's say where you are working, if you don't give me the permission, I may not enter. So it is the government, the chiefs who have been giving land to those people. So if the chiefs cooperate with the government, everything will be okay, and those things will halt. That's our main reason. So it's the government to instruct the chiefs to stop those things. That is our main plea to the government.
This petition came 2 days ago, and this is after we saw that dialogue here in Accra to deal with the menace of illegal mining. Was your group part of that discussion?
No, we're not invited, but we sent previous petition to Parliament, and it was read by Honorable Rashid Papo, supported by Honorable Amakufibua on Parliament. That is why we send those petitions to even to presidency and to Christian Council as a nation.
So are you satisfied so far with the recent directives from government?
Oh, we are pleased with what government is doing, but we are pleading to government that it shouldn't let this one be like what happened the last time. We wanted our river bodies, our land to be safe. So we are pleading. We are pleased with that, but we are pleading to government to at least enhance the security more so that these things can stop once and for all.
All right, thank you for your time here this morning. Michael Adeba is Vice President of the Galamsey Action Group, which has sent a petition, copied the President and other relevant agencies and persons, and they're basically asking that traditional authorities, especially in the Western and Western North regions, support government's fight against illegal mining. You're watching News Desk with me, Bernice Abubedulansa. Now, a member of the Supreme Court panel which heard the 2020 election petition has defended the dismissal of the NDC's flag bearer's position. The Apex Court in March said John Dramani Mahama failed to prove that no candidate got more than 50% of the votes cast, and therefore affirmed the declaration of President Akufo-Addo as outright winner of the polls. The former president, however, criticized the ruling.
I believe that the refusal of the Electoral Commission chairperson to testify in this election petition leaves a very bad precedent for the future. I disagree with the suggestions of our justices that an election petition is akin to any other civil litigation, and therefore an EC chairperson whose functions go to the heart of our democracy can, by a legal sleight of hand, avoid accounting for her stewardship in an appropriate forum such as the highest court of the land. Our legal team, led by Mr. Chachuchikata, put together our case in a clear manner, which left no one in doubt about the issues that were at stake. Apart from seeking to ensure compliance with the Constitution and for the true choice of the people of Ghana to be respected, the petition sought to provide opportunity for transparency and accountability in the management of our electoral process. But no one who followed the proceedings of the Supreme Court will be surprised with the judgments pronounced a few hours ago. Much as I'm aware that we are legally bound by the decision of the highest court of the land, the Supreme Court of Ghana, I disagree with the process of the trial and the ruling of the court.
Well, speaking at a high-level stakeholders forum to review the 2020 polls and its aftermath, Justice Gertrude Tokono said the court's calculation when dealing with the election petition showed that the EC chairperson only made an error during her declaration and that President Akufo-Addo got more than 50% of the votes cast. One major issue of concern that came up during the polls was the claim of vote padding by the NDC, but Justice Tokono said the NDC should have brought pink sheets to back the claim. The Supreme Court judge also put out what is expected from justices who will sit on future petitions.
So we concluded with what is a direction to courts when it comes to election petitions, a threefold duty that had been first enunciated in the English case of Morgan and Simpson, which we found useful to adopt. That if the election was, and so it will be useful for political players to appreciate that any election petition would look at this threefold duty. If the election was conducted so badly that it was not substantially in accordance with the law as the election is vitiated. So our summary was that we enunciated this principle that an election would be voided upon the occurrence of infractions that actually affect the votes of the citizens cast at the polling stations and not the incidence of administrative errors or mistakes committed by officers charged with the conduct of such election, unless those errors or mistakes affect the result. So this is a quote from Adinyora JSC that we ended the petition with. Courts usually apply the election code to protect, not to defeat the right to vote, but public policy favors salvaging the election and giving effect to the voters' intent. Consistently, we are looking for the voters' intent. What did the voters vote? How did they vote? What were the valid votes? If you can identify the valid votes, then that is what the courts are interested in.
Now, the minority in Parliament is alleging government interference in the publication of a nationwide load-shedding timetable. This, according to the opposition MPs, is because it would be an admission that the unreliable power supply is a nationwide problem. Ranking Member of Parliament's Mines and Energy Committee, John Jinapo, who strongly believes the recent wave of power outages has to do with financing, also accused the NPP government of reversing the gains made by the Mahama administration in the energy sector. Here are excerpts of a news conference he addressed on Wednesday.
More recently, you would also recall that the Union of the Electricity Company of Ghana embarked on an industrial action demanding the removal of their managing director, citing incompetence, duplicity, and total lack of understanding of the power distribution company. Indeed, we've all witnessed a lot of agitation within the ECG. We are also picking similar signals at NEDCO. There was a similar one at VRA where the unional staff issued a threat. And we are also hearing that all is not well at Bui Power. It is therefore clear that Ghana's energy sector is in a state of crisis. As if that is not enough, the ECG, GRIDCO, and the Honorable Minister himself has been providing conflicting timelines on when this debilitating power crisis will be resolved. What is even more disturbing is that despite confirmation from GRIDCO a couple of weeks ago that the country would continue to experience these power outages into the foreseeable future, for which reason they promised to publish a load management schedule, the anticipated schedule has been put on hold due to political pressure from the executive. GRIDCO is willing to publish that management schedule, but the executive has insisted that they do not publish that schedule. And so the ordinary Ghanaian is having to bear the brunt of these intermittent outages and its accompanying challenges with distraction to gadgets, whilst GRIDCO would have ordinarily published the schedule. It is a well-known fact, especially among energy sector industry players, that the current outages in the country is due to financial challenges and not the unconvincing reasons that we have been receiving from them. This is because the transmission lines and transformers are congested, and they are congested due to underinvestment and lack of regular maintenance arising from the poor financial health of the energy sector SOEs.
John Junapor also outlined a series of recommendations, including a ban on the nomination of political appointees to sensitive positions at the Energy Ministry. He says if adopted by government, these directives or proposals would address the doomsday situation.
We are not just criticizing, we are not just pointing faults. As a responsible minority committed to serving this country and poised to occupy the seat of government, we are providing alternative solutions, providing some pointers for government to consider. One, the energy sector players must be proactive and inform, that is publish, a schedule to electricity consumers who will be affected by these outages in advance, so that would-be or affected customers can take remedial steps to mitigate the effect of such outages. Because if people know that their power is going to go off at a certain point in time, they may prepare so that their gadgets can be safeguarded. Two, we are of the view that government must cut down on wasteful and frivolous expenditure and inject that much needed capital into the power sector, especially for that of GRIDCO, to make up for the impaired revenue or cash flow of these utilities. Government must desist from political interference in the management of the energy sector. Consequently, we wish to caution government to refrain from engaging in political appointments within these utility companies, especially at middle management levels when vacancies are declared. We believe that at least, as for the middle management levels, when vacancies are declared, the top management should be empowered and should be allowed to go through this process.
This is News Desk on your most credible news source, JoyNews. Coming up in business, Ghana's export earnings expected to pick up strongly in the coming months as commodity prices hit pre-pandemic levels.
Good morning, time for business. My name is Darryl Kwao. Ghana's earnings from exports are expected to pick up strongly in the coming months. This is based on a new World Bank report, which shows that commodity prices have hit pre-pandemic levels. Here's George Yaffe with more.
The World Bank report revealed that the development was influenced by a pickup in economic activities as a result of ease in COVID-19 restrictions. Crude prices, which hit record low levels from last year rebounded strongly to hit $70 a barrel before slowing to $63 by the middle of April this year. Agricultural prices, including cocoa, are expected to record about 14% hike for this year. The World Bank, in its Commodity Price Index report, is also projecting an 850,000 metric tons of cocoa production for Ghana this year. The country ended last year securing about $14.4 billion from the export of cocoa, gold, and crude oil. However, this represents a marginal decline compared to what we secured at the end of 2019. The Bank of Ghana attributes this to declining crude prices on the international market. Now, securing some good earnings from these exports will immediately impact on the Ghana cedi stability, as we may get more dollars, resulting in an improved international reserves position. It will also affect government's revenue, so we can get more money to finance ongoing infrastructure projects. However, there's a flip side to this development. Ghana also consumes crude oil in terms of finished petroleum products, so if the prices start going up on the international market, there'll be a negative impact on the Ghanaian economy in terms of high fuel prices at the pumps. This could affect the cost of living and its associated impact on inflation as well in the coming months.
Now, Ghana is hopeful of becoming the automotive hub for Africa in the near future with a focus on industrial transformation. According to Trade and Industry Minister Alan Kyerematen, the entry of some key manufacturing firms into the country has boosted the policy drive towards that agenda. He was speaking at a short ceremony to open the Accra branch of Zonda Tech.
When we talk about vehicle assembly, it demonstrates to us that some of the powerful economies in the world are where they are because of industrialization. And many of these powerful economies happen also to become the leading manufacturers of automotive and vehicle trucks and passenger cars. So the start of the assembly industry in Ghana is pointing Ghana to a very bright future. And hopefully, in the very near future, we hope that Ghana will become the hub for the vehicle and automotive assembly, not only in West Africa, but on the whole continent of Africa. And this is important for a number of reasons. Number one, it is creating highly skilled jobs. I'm sure you all agree with me that the number one problem confronting us in our country is how we deal with the challenge of unemployment.
And that's your business update. Sports is coming up next.